Thank you very much. And as you said, a warm welcome to everybody. Really excited that we have our second annual symposium, and great that we've got so many people presenting today. And we're putting the spotlight on the recent APPG with Housing and Care for Older People Inquiry Report on the regeneration of outdated sheltered housing. And again, many thanks to Lord Best, Richard Best, who is joining us for part of this afternoon's session. The session is made possible through the UKRI, the United Kingdom Research and Innovation Team, and the link back to Wales is here really critical because Helena Herclots, the former Older Persons Commissioner of Wales, chaired the Healthy Ageing Challenge, and one of the challenges there was to think about how we can design and create the homes and communities for an ageing population right across the UK, but also in Wales in particular. I'm also struck that 7 years ago, just over 7 years ago, the expert group in Wales looked at what the future of housing in Wales should be for an ageing population. That very much focused on new build, but there was some reference to both how we can create more sustainable homes, how we can update and remodel our sheltered housing, and also how we can use things like technology to improve the way we deliver and design services and transform the way we provide operations for older adults in a variety of settings, including sheltered housing. Well, 7 years on, the APPG report looked more at the spotlight on outdated sheltered housing, and this is what we're going to be focusing on today. But I'm going to be co-chairing with Joanne. So Joanne Karain from Melin, can I introduce you as I have just done, and a warm welcome.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. Thanks very much. And yeah, a warm welcome to everyone joining us this afternoon. It's a session that I always enjoy very much. So we have got a packed agenda this afternoon, so I won't talk for too long. But I think I often hear about great ambitions, and sometimes it's really difficult to translate those big ideas into day-to-day practice, and events like this provide a platform to do just that. So huge thanks to all of our speakers who've taken the time today to share their experience and thoughts on regenerating sheltered housing, the challenge of economic and environmental sustainability, ageing well, exploring potential linkages between the Eliminate agenda in Wales and intergenerational action, and finally safeguarding homes for older people in Wales. So a big welcome to Lord Best. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Many thanks. Well, thanks to good old HousingLIN, we're all becoming completely dependent on Jeremy and all his team. It's become really just part of the fabric now of doing our jobs in the world of housing. Really grateful for having this platform from the HousingLIN. They did all the hard work in producing this report from our all-party parliamentary group, Regeneration of Outdated Sheltered Housing. Just to give you a bit of background, I have to say, I think I'm feeling just mildly depressed about the scene that I contemplate out there of the whole housing for older people scene. The new government has not said anything very positive or very interesting about older people's housing. We aren't seeing more resources just when we really need a shot in the arm and a lot more support and help. The task force set up by the previous government produced, Jeremy was part of it, a very powerful and useful report that we all want to see published, but it's all still locked away somewhere in the MHCLG, the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Government should be getting on with it, spreading the word, publishing that report. It wasn't political. It didn't matter that it was the previous lot that had commissioned it. It was done by an independent bunch of people. We want more. We want more action, and we want it now. So I feel a kind of slight shadowy cloud hanging over us today, not least because in terms of building new homes for older people, and I'm a huge advocate for all the good things that achieves, we're not doing very well. We're not doing well. Professor Les Mayhew tells us that we need up to 50,000 homes for England and Wales across the piece. 50,000 homes a year for older people. We're doing sort of 7,000. And that's mostly now in England at any rate. I don't know how well it stands up in Wales, but it's mostly now for pretty middle class, pretty affluent buyers, rather than the social housing sector expanding its work. It's not a very impressive record of new build. And then we feed into the mix what's happening to the stock that we've already got. There are 525,000 what we used to call sheltered housing homes out there in England and Wales. And an awful lot of that is now past its sell-by date. Built in the 60s, even some of it before the 60s, due for an overhaul. And the reaction of quite a few of the registered providers is to sell it off, get rid of it, repurpose it for something completely different, and lose it from the stock of housing for older people. When you put the losses against the gains from the very small amount of new build that we're now seeing, mostly extra care, we're going backwards. We're doing less than we were doing. We're having a smaller stock of property out there. This is not very good. What can we do about it? Well, we can rescue and save and preserve and keep the 525,000 homes we've already got, or replace them with the same, rather than losing stock, which is a path of decline that we really don't need at a time when the demographic trend is for more and more older people, more and more people living in unsatisfactory accommodation in older age. We need to get the stock that we've already got up to fit and proper status. Awful lot of bed sits still out there. Those schemes with bed sits that are doing very well for the people who've been in there for 10 years, but when they come vacant, really not acceptable to a lot of people today. The 75-year-olds, 77-year-olds, whatever they are a lot more choosy than they were 15, 20 years ago, and quite rightly so. Bed sits, this is not, if you're going to spend 95% of your waking hours in this particular room, it's got to be good. And we have an awful lot of stock now that really does need refreshing, if not replacing. So this gloomy picture hangs over me rather at the moment. But the arguments in favor of doing more and doing better and doing up what we've got are really just unanswerably important. You can spend £50,000 on each sheltered flat and give it another 30, 40 years of proper life. That sort of spending saves you building brand new for 200,000, maybe 250,000. It's a bargain if we can preserve and keep what we've got, if we can improve it and not lose it. You know, I think we need to rescue people from both the ailments of older age. As we get older, we get more expensive to the rest of the community. If we're in a place that is going to be safe and warm and healthy and keep us away from getting lonely, all those things are going to save the NHS money. We all know how it is the housing for older people that saves on the health service. It saves on the adult care services. It rescues people from fuel poverty. When we get a vacancy, we've always got to remember that the person moving in is that individual usually, but maybe a couple, they are leaving behind very often a social rented property for a family, which is gold dust. That's what we need desperately more of, proper social rented housing for families. And we achieve that by spending a relatively modest amount, keeping our existing sheltered stock up to speed, up to a decent standard. You're always getting 2 for 1 if you're doing housing for older people, because you're always helping the people that stand behind, that move into the apartment, the house that becomes vacant. that scheme on the estate that knocks down the garages that nobody liked anyway, and where the youths congregate, and produces 15 brand new, today's equivalent of sheltered housing for older people, for later living, and creates 12 vacancies on the council estate, the housing association estate behind, 12 new spaces at a social rent. This is tremendous value for money. And so it is with improving the stock that we've got. Step one is for every social housing landlord to have a look at what it is that's out there and do a proper stock taking, an analysis of the assets that they've got, and have a plan, even if at the moment it's not possible to cost that plan, or you can cost it, but you don't think the resources are there to meet those costs. But at least to have a plan, have a strategy for the older housing that you've got, that we always used to call sheltered housing, and now we don't like calling it that anymore, and rightly so. But housing for later life. Look at the stock. What has got to be replaced? What has got to be upgraded? What can we demolish and rebuild for the same purpose? Not a switch to meet other needs, because we can't afford to lose the stock we've already got and go backwards. One of the things that we proposed in the all-party parliamentary group's report, this Regeneration of Outdated Sheltered Housing, was that before selling anything, there should be a charter of the behaviour that is expected of registered providers, that there should be a first refusal to another registered provider before losing the property from the sector altogether. I'm really rather appalled to see the number of properties that we've been losing every year, not just sheltered housing, but just sales of older properties by social landlords. It's about 22,000 homes a year are sold by registered providers, diminishing the total stock faster than we can build new and replace. And that's particularly important in terms of older people's housing. So we produced a charter for sales, and we wanted the social housing regulators to insist upon adherence to that charter, to the behaviour that you should demonstrate before you flog off the precious asset that we've got. I think that there is, I'll be a bit more hopeful. I think there is some glimmers of light. Government has recognised that the bigger picture requires spending not just on additionality, on extra homes, but spending on what we've already got. There's all the building safety expenditure, everybody recognising that we now have to make sure that buildings are safe, but also that following that awful tragedy of little Arwab Ishak in Rochdale, we now have Arwab's law and the regulator insisting upon decent standards that won't mean cold and mold. And that whole policy shift toward regeneration in the wider social housing sector applies very much in terms of housing for older people. The social housing regulator with the Ombudsman following our Social Housing Regulation Act of 2023, this shows that there is a different emphasis, an emphasis on what we've already got, on bringing that up to scratch. And resources for that become suddenly a bit more available than in the past. This is a change of policy. Homes England were adamant here in England. They were adamant that you weren't going to get any money to do up your old sheltered housing unless you were adding additional units, knocking it all down and getting more than you started with, or regenerating what you've got, but still ending up with a plus. That rule now has evaporated, and there is the same resources are there that were just simply for additionality are now possible to be deployed for the whole regeneration agenda. we said 10% of all of Homes England's funding and GLA's funding for those in London, 10% of the resources should be allocated to older people's housing. That's a minimum. That would mean gearing it up, the 300,000 homes a year that ministers are all sticking to. Change of government, the same number, 300,000 homes a year. 10% would be 30,000 homes for older people if we concentrated the resources in all sectors, new build, across the piece. And we said of that resource available for older people, a third should be for regeneration of existing stock. And as you get 3 times as much, that would achieve about the same number of homes as we would build new, would be regenerated every year. We saw this as a real priority because if we lose this stock and have to replace it, because sooner or later we wake up to the fact that it's incredibly good value for money to produce housing for older people. If we lose it and we have to replace it, it costs 3 times as much. It costs 5 times as much, probably. It's bad value for money. And I think this message needs to be relayed to governments in Wales as well. I'm sure exactly the same issues will be affecting you in Wales. Well, we send our reports from the all-party parliamentary group on their happy way, and they do the rounds. And do they make an impression? Do they reach their audiences? Does anybody take any notice? Mostly not. Mostly things just gather dust. But thanks to having the HousingLIN, Jeremy's team, promoting and pushing the things that we have pumped out, there is always the chance that they catch light and things happen and we get results. And I think this is very timely. There is a mood out there that switches resources from just new build, even though I'm desperately keen that the amount of new build should increase for older people. But there is a mood that says, and let's look also at the existing stock and take this really seriously, and use the resources that we've got to save the stock that we already have. It is, I think someone else has entitled their talk, a precious, safeguard this precious resource. Absolutely, that's Victoria Lloyd's title for her talk later this afternoon. Absolutely right, we must preserve and keep what we've already got, and all of you are part of that effort. So thank you to everybody, and thank you in particular to the HousingLIN.
Richard, thank you very much. A really great form of words. And I know that while you've been talking, we've put various links to the report and other key aspects that you've touched on, so that people can access those if they want to read at their leisure. So we can also help disseminate and help make that impact that you described. Just one thing you may not be aware is that in Wales, the Welsh Government produce an annual return of the amount of retirement living units of accommodation there are by local authority on an annual basis. And it shows that over the last 2 years, there's been a 14 unit increase only, so more or less a standstill supply, and that fear that we're not growing and actually losing stock is something that I know a number of us around the table this afternoon, both the virtual table of contributors but also people joining us as delegates have as well. So we welcome comments and questions on that, but I'm going to hand back to Joanne so she can sort of go through the presenters and the contributors of our sector showcase.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Okay, as I said earlier, we've got an action-packed afternoon. I've already touched on some of the themes that we'll be covering this afternoon. So I would like to hand over to Carol Cole to hear about what's going on in Wrexham. Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Joanne. Good afternoon. My name is Carol Cole and I'm a project officer with Wrexham County Borough Council, and I'm here today just to give you a very quick whistle-stop tour through our decision to regenerate some of our outdated sheltered accommodation units. I'll just start by sharing my screen. I'm hoping you will be able to see that. Could everyone see those? Yeah, that's fine.
That's
great.
perfect,
Lovely.
Carol.
Thank you for that. So first off, I'll just start just by giving you a few key facts about Wrexham County Borough Council. We've got a population of just over 135,000, and over 20% of that population are aged 65 or over. Our council housing stock currently stands at 11,074, and 657 of those are units of sheltered accommodation, which are accommodated in 22 schemes spread around the borough. We currently still provide a 7-day warden service to our sheltered accommodation tenants. Some of the wardens are based at a specific scheme. Some are on a mobile visiting service for the more dispersed areas. So why did we decide to refurbish? Well, the majority of our sheltered units are built between the 60s and 70s, and they were a mixture of bedsits and small flats. We found sometimes that the properties can be difficult to let, and they can cause problems with people with mobility issues. I'll show you later on in the presentation what I mean in terms of the size that we were looking at in them. So we also held some open days in the schemes, and some of the feedback that came back was that they were very dark in the communal areas, and again that the accommodation was too small. So we commissioned an options appraisal on our units to see what can we do with them. Can we repurpose them? Can we refurbish them? Should we use them for a different client group? Should we maybe demolish and start again? So we were looking at everything that came through, and the results that came back from that were that all of the schemes, apart from one, could potentially be remodelled. And as Lord Best touched on earlier, older people's aspirations are changing. They don't want to be living in bed sits. They want more spacious accommodation. And we also need to look at the ease of access within the properties for their mobility around the flats themselves. So the proposed refurbishment programme would address these issues for us. They provide better quality of accommodation and a better space needs. As I mentioned, some of them were very, very small. So we asked for a design quality of 50 square metres to ensure that there was sufficient space there. So we went out and we gave a design brief. Now we did engage an external design team to do this on our behalf. Now the reasons behind this, we do have the expertise within the council. Unfortunately, because of resources, there just wasn't enough people to be able to do this. Plus as well, we wanted the opportunity to work with a company who's done this sort of work before, who's provided designs for older persons accommodation. So the design brief included improving the accessibility of the apartments and the energy efficiency within the scheme, to incorporate the design quality requirements of 50 square metres for the one-bed apartments. We also wanted to put in some renewable elements, such as PV panels and internal wall installation, triple glazed windows. So the PV panels were essentially linked to the communal areas, so that then saved money on service charges for our residents. The air source heat pumps were fitting in with Welsh Government's decarbonisation agenda. And the triple glazed windows, although they were triple glazed, we did install larger windows because we were finding in some of our schemes that if a resident was sitting on their sofa or if they're in the bedroom, they were quite isolated from the outside if the mobility wasn't great and they weren't able to get up. So we made the decision to fit larger windows lower down. So if their mobility wasn't great, if they were not able to move from where they were, they still felt part of the world. They could see the outside world going on, and it just reduces social isolation for them. So I'll just move on now on to what I meant in terms of the accommodation. This was 2 kitchens in one of our existing units, and as you can see from them, they were very, very small turning circles. So somebody who had maybe a mobility frame or a wheelchair would struggle to use these kitchens. We did have a little bit of worry from our tenants, because some of them preferred to have a separate kitchen to a living room, because we were proposing to have an open plan kitchen living room area. However, since they've moved in, they found they just love it. It's great. It increases their mobility. They don't need to rely on people to do things for them as much. So that's what we were dealing with in terms of existing accommodation. And this is now what we've moved to. This is a kitchen in one of our newly refurbished units. As you can see, there's plenty of workspace, there's plenty of cupboard space. It's a big turning area. It's the whole length of the kitchen area. So that's at the top end of the kitchen, and then we go to the living area at the bottom. As you can see, it extends on from the kitchen. And you can see at the bottom with the window what I was referring to in terms of the larger windows. So if you're sitting by that chair, you can still see what's going on in the outside world. You're not isolated. So it does increase the tenants' mental well-being. So moving on into one of the bedrooms, again, we've got the lower level window. So it increases their social inclusion in their communities. The bedrooms are a good size. We installed a sliding door so that they can access their wet room from their bedrooms. They're having to come out the bedroom door and through the hallway. But we do have obviously a separate door in the hallway if they have guests visiting to be able to use it. On the opposite side of the bedroom, we've got a large walk-in cupboard for them, and we color-coded the doors, so all the white doors are storage, because there's plenty of storage within the apartments. So the white doors are storage, the wood doors are access points throughout the apartments. As you can see, this is the wet room. There's ample space there should they need increased care. There's enough there space to be able to get a carer to come in. There's their mobility aids, their wheelchairs, enough room and turning space for people to move about. Because that was the main aim of us refurbishing this, is that some of our tenants, because the units were small, if they needed further adaptations or further mobility or further care, there wasn't enough space in the properties to be able to offer them that. So that would then mean they would need to transfer to a different property. So by doing this, it's sort of a win-win situation, really. It's better for our residents in terms of they can go into their property and they can stay there until virtually, perhaps even until they may need to go into a residential home. And for us, it was a win situation in terms of that our void property turnaround lessens, our transfer costs reduce. So I'll just move on to the next one. When I mentioned that some of the surveys and the open days, people had said that they were dark and very dated. You can see this is one of our communal rooms, and they were dark. They are dated. They have sort of got that nursing home feel to them, if you like. So we wanted to get away from that. So we've changed into one of our new units now. This is when you come into the reception. First of all, it's very light, very airy, very modern. It's welcoming. And that leads on then into our communal lounge area. So this is the complete opposite of the slides I showed you previously. It's light, it's airy, it's comfortable, it's cozy. We've got some furniture grouped around. What we wanted to create was an area where you could have different activities going on. Some residents may not want to get involved in them, but there's an area where they can sit and not feel isolated. So we wanted to try to include everybody. So in this communal area, you've got your seating area, which is sort of a lounge area, but then you move on to the other side and we have the dining area. So we can have our communal dinners, our coffee mornings, our bingo, and our activities, jigsaws, whatever it may be. But somebody may want to be in the room but not be involved. So we've got the best of both in those two aspects within property. We were also conscious as well, obviously our units are based within communities themselves. So we were conscious of, we needed to take into consideration what the outside of the properties would look like and the impact on the surrounding communities. So in this slide in the top, you can see that was our Tira Capel sheltered unit, and that's what it looked like from the outside. Again, it's very dated. It wasn't great. So we've now, as on the bottom part of the picture, you can see how it looks when we've got the extended bay windows, which helped us to increase the apartment size. You can see we've got the EV charging points on the left-hand side there. So we've installed those to help for both things. Those are for residents' use, but additionally, as a council, if we decide then to have an electric vehicle fleet, that capacity is there to be used as well, to be utilised. So it covers both aspects really from a resident's point of view. I mean, obviously residents will always have priority. And then on the rear, again, we had a lot of unused space. The communal garden wasn't really used. It wasn't user-friendly for them. So we've utilised all this space and created a better garden where we've got a maintained garden by the council, but additionally, we've put in some raised planters. So should people want to be doing some gardening, it's at a height that's manageable for them. It's not a huge area, so they can just do small bits when they want to. Just outside of the photograph on the right hand side there, we've got some benches, so we can have they can have some socializing outside as well as inside the property, so it covers all aspects. You can just see in the corner there as well the air source heat pumps which are go into each property. So going forward for us, we've always said that we would do 4 units and then we would take a step back and analyse what we've done, reflect on where we are and what our needs are going forward. So we've completely finished 2 units. We have another 2 units which are due to be completed the end of this December and the end of November. Once those are up and running and the tenants have moved back in, we'll be in a position then to take a reflection on how things have worked. Now, we did have a little bit of resistance in terms of decanting tenants, because we did meet with them and ask them how they wanted us to refurbish the units. And surprisingly, 46% wanted us to refurbish around them. They wanted to stay in the unit, but because of the sheer volume of work, that wasn't possible. So we worked with them to decant them. We spent a lot of time finding what areas they wanted to go to. We took as much stress away from them as we could in terms of changing over their electricity accounts, changing over their phones, getting the carpets and everything. We did everything for them. They literally just had to move on the day from one property to another. They were a little bit worried about it to begin with, but once we've done the process, it wasn't as difficult for them as what they imagined. And the feedback that we've had from them going back into the units has been great. They're really pleased with them. They find the space within the properties is great, the ease of using the properties and how warm they are, because I know that previously there had been some issues in terms of the expense of heating the old properties, and the new ones have reduced their costs quite vastly. So just one more thing I wanted to mention was the challenges really for us. I say the challenge, there was 2 main big challenges for us in terms of, number one, obviously finance, and I think that's across the board. So that's something that was a challenge. And then obviously, because we're working with older people, was the decanting process, putting their minds at rest, and making sure that they were happy with everything. They were happy in the new properties, and they were happy once they've gone back. And as I say, the feedback has been great from them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carol. What a huge transformation, and to a standard that means that the home will respond to increasing frailty. I'd really be interested in hearing the outcome of the review when you've done the first 4. I anticipate people will have lots of questions for you afterwards. I've got questions, but we shall now move on. So welcome to Sean. Thank you for joining us today. And over to you to discuss Ageing Well in United Welsh.
Hello everybody, good afternoon. I'm Sian, I'm the Living Well Manager from United Welsh. Can everybody see my slides?
Yep, that's perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so what I wanted to talk to you about today is our Connect service, and I've entitled my presentation Ageing Well, Staying Connected, Involved and Happy Later in Life. I think it's really important that when people move into sheltered accommodation or extra care, that they live the next best part of their lives. And for some, as they get older, their enjoyment of life might actually start. They might not have had a particularly happy early part of their life. So that's really important to us. And we do have a team within Living Well called Connect, who do lots of wonderful things with our residents. And I wanted to talk to you about that today. And it's not letting me move on to the next slide. So bear with me. Why are you not doing that? There we go.
Yeah, should do it. Yeah,
Just technical issues. So our Connect service is run by Connect facilitators, and we have one senior Connect facilitator who looks after the team. We provide one-to-one support for our residents who might be feeling lonely or isolated, or might just need a confidence boost to come out and about and get involved and connected. We recruit management, resident and community volunteers, and we have over 60 across our service, and we have just over 900 properties at the moment. So we're doing really, really well. We engage with our local communities to build relationships and foster inclusion. A couple of examples of that is that Caerphilly miners work quite closely with us to volunteer and provide services. And we also have a wonderful intergenerational choir. We always roll that one out in Blaen y Gwent that works really, really well. And there's also a lot of inter-scheme collaboration at the moment. And one of the things that I'm keen to kind of introduce, and we are getting there, is the digital agenda. So to try to connect people digitally if they can't connect in person. And at the moment, we've got 3 schemes we're working together on an art project. They're putting together a mural and making it, it's going to be very multicultural. It's going to capture all the diversity within our schemes, and training as well. So some of our residents said they wanted first aid training. So we've been able to organise that for 10 of our residents at the moment, and we're hoping that we can roll it out to more. So we like to see the person and not the label. And I wanted to talk to you about one person in particular who's a resident volunteer and one of our sheltered sites, to kind of demonstrate some of the great work that Connect are doing and our residents and volunteers are doing. So if I can move the slide on, and this is the wonderful Pete, and he won 3rd place at the TPAS Awards for communities supporting communities. And we heard last week that he's been nominated for an Age Cymru Award as Changemaker, older people who make the difference. A little bit about Pete. He's in his 70s. He's a DJ. He owns a canal boat. He's an active volunteer in his own scheme, and he volunteers at others. He supports a men's shed at one of our extra care schemes, and he runs bingo sessions, and he's teaching the ukulele. So that's among many of Pete's talents. But one of the things that we have been able to support him with is setting up a podcast, and he calls himself Pete the Podcast. So what's it about? So he goes out and visits older people in their homes to capture their incredible real life experiences. There's a photograph there of Pete recording a podcast at one of our schemes. He's just finished his first series of the 10 episodes and 2 specials. The 2 specials were for Black History Month, and he interviewed our chief exec. Just like to be interviewed, Richard. So Pete went along and had a chat with him. And all episodes are on YouTube, Facebook, and Pete's very own website, cleverly entitled betterlateandclever.com. And the purpose of it when we started it was not just to connect people and to hear about the wonderful stories that are out there, but it was to share knowledge and wisdom of people's past experiences and just provide an opportunity for intergenerational learning. And, you know, I don't know how Pete finds the time to do everything that he does, but he's absolutely awesome. And he's a great volunteer. So the next item I wanted to talk to you about was Newtown Court. So that's in a real area of deprivation in central Cardiff. It was an unpopular choice as sheltered scheme because it's next to 2 large homeless hostels, and we had very, very poor resident involvement there until, so I don't want to say this too blithely because it wasn't just this, but we started Lunch Club. Well, I say we started Lunch Club, I have to take my hat off to Denise, who's the Senior Connect facilitator. She went in and she was right, we are going to get engagement here. And she literally used the old-fashioned method. She knocked on everybody's door every time she was there, even if she got the door slammed in her face, until eventually people were coming out and speaking to her. So now we have weekly sessions that are supported by resident volunteers and 2 from another scheme in Caerphilly. And they are absolutely wonderful, those 2. They do not just do Newtown Court, they go off and volunteer in other schemes as well. She introduced Happy to Chat and worked with Brunel University in London to do that. And I've got a separate slide to talk to you about Happy to Chat. But also at Newtown Court, we wanted to celebrate the diversity there. And it was the #1 challenge. We wanted to make everybody feel equal, included and together, as there are up to 9 spoken languages at the scheme. And Denise created events and activities that would be inclusive, so everybody could join in, art, projects, food. And we used Google Translate when we needed to, because 38% of the residents at Newtown Court were not born in the UK. So that was a real challenge in terms of involvement, but it's all paid off, and there's been a huge increase in engagement. 2 people attended before the intensive community engagement started, and we now average 25 to 26 on a regular basis, which ever so proud of the team for achieving. And there you can see there's a bit of a snapshot there of gentleman in the shorts is Ben. He's our housing coordinator, chatting to some of the residents, and that was one of our D-Day celebrations that we did across Living Well. So in terms of Happy to Chat, I've got a little slide about that. So this is actually great, and it works, and it's really, really simple. So there's all different types of badges that you can have. As you can see, there's a sample of those there, and the posters go up. And it's basically you wear your badge and you go down to the communal lounge, and somebody knows that you are available to talk to, because sometimes when you walk into a room and somebody's there, you don't know if they want to talk or if they're going to be friendly. And the funding that Denise has got for this allows us to have tea, coffee and biscuits available 24/7. So if someone's not sleeping in the middle of the night and they go down and there's somebody else who also can't sleep down there with a badge on that says Happy to Chat, they can sit there and have a conversation. And Denise has said to me, she knows it's working, because when she goes in on a Monday, all the tea and biscuits and coffee have gone. So people are using it, which is great. So yeah, real success there. It's been one of those schemes where sometimes you think, oh, I don't really know what to do with Newtown Court. How can we solve the resident engagement problem, the popularity of the scheme? But just by some good old-fashioned community engagement and listening to the residents and just persistence has paid off. And we've got a really wonderful community down there now. I just wanted to talk about what's next on our agenda in terms of what we're going to do in terms of making people feel happy and healthier later in life. Healthy relationships is one of the things that I'm personally doing at the moment with our Connect team. We wanted to go out and talk to our residents about what that looks like, because something that some of you may be more than aware of is that, older people are quite susceptible to abuse in terms of financial abuse from relatives and things like that. And we wanted to make sure that they were aware of what that looks like and raise awareness of that. And one of the things that I didn't even think of, one of the Connect team told me, I used the term gaslighting, and they said, you're going to have to do a slide and explain what that is. And absolutely right. They were very interested in what that term meant, and it sparked a lot of conversation around, oh, well, I knew somebody once who spoke to me like that, or, oh gosh, so-and-so, and oh, perhaps maybe I've done that. And it really got people to think. But also what came out of healthy relationships is one scheme I went to, and this is really, really unusual, but we had 8 men there and 2 women. So that we were like, wow, this is really good to get so many men down. And they've got a wonderful community there. And as well as our men's shed, which is at the top of Blaen Gwent, and obviously we cover Cardiff and Caerphilly, Monmouth and the Vale as well. We were thinking, right, well, actually, there's a lot of men at our schemes who've got really interesting lives, and they really want to support each other. Let's think about not a men's club necessarily, but a men's forum for our service, so we can talk about the real issues that affect men. So we're looking to do that hopefully in the new year, and I've already tapped up a couple of our residents who I know will be really interested in that. And we're always listening. We want some new and exciting opportunities to engage with our residents. It's their service. We want them to be happy and healthy. And we do really go out there and say, what do you want? Some of them do just want to do the traditional stuff, like just have a coffee and play bingo. But others, like Pete, want to get out there and have the opportunity to do different things. And we're happy to support with that where we can. So, and I just wanted to finish off by saying that older people are amazing. They lived interesting, fulfilling lives, and your life doesn't stop at the door of sheltered housing. We want to create opportunities to enhance people's experiences and share and celebrate each other's achievements, new and old. So yeah, that's my presentation. So thank you for listening, everybody.
Wow, Sean, thank you, and how inspiring your presentation was, and it really kind of demonstrates that determination, that knocking on the door over and over again, and you know, demonstrating that commitment to really bring about positive change. Thank you so much again.
Joanne, can I just add something, Joanne?
Sure.
Also the transformation, because I remember engaging with United Welsh through COVID as well, and some of the real challenges for many of your residents and customers as well. So how you're now delivering this compared to 2-3 years ago as well is a real step change.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, I'm sure people will be either asking questions in the Q&A session later, or getting in touch with you, Sean, to hear more about how you've achieved what has been achieved. Thank you. Over to Ed Hughes now to hear about sustainability and what's going on in ClwydAlyn.
Thanks for that. I'll just share my slides now, Joanne, and then is that Ed okay?
Yep, perfect.
Great, thanks, Joe, and yeah, thanks as well to Joe and Jeremy for the opportunity to speak today. So I'd said I'd do sort of 10 minutes on what could be the future for sheltered housing. I think before looking at the future, I think it's really acknowledging kind of what the challenges have been, and I think I'll kind of get through this quite quickly because it touches on a lot of the points that colleagues have already spoken about. In terms of the challenges that sheltered housing has faced, we've seen the rise of extra care, and in many respects, sheltered has kind of been the poorer relation because it can't compete with the you know, some of the facilities that we have within the extra care services across Wales. We've got the challenges with you know, older stock that doesn't necessarily meet modern day requirements. So it's the basic things that people need to be able to live in, not just live, but actually remain and stay in their homes longer term, rather than having to seek alternatives because of a change in their health condition. Again, real big one, Lloyd best touched on, it's around people's aspiration. You know, aspiration has changed greatly. You know, over the last decade. When we think about sheltered housing, when it was developed, you know, sort of 30 years ago, you know, 55 was considered quite old probably, whereas now most people who are kind of 55, 60 don't necessarily aspire to live in, you know, what we class as older person's accommodation with pull cords. We've also seen the erosion of funding. You know, again, I remember visiting my nan many years ago, and there was always the full-time warden who was on site, but we've seen that the huge pressures that local authorities are under, and you know, what you've seen over time is, you know, the removal of, you know, full-time wardens. They've kind of gone to part-time. Some of them are now kind of supported or covered by housing officers, and we've seen the erosion of funding as well for you know, some of the telecare, making it sort of more unaffordable for a number of social housing residents. We've also seen a rise in complex mental health issues, and you know, that can have a real destabilising effect on scheme life. You know, when you look at the bandings on the housing lists, you know, those that are struggling or have more complex issues, it's not just younger people. You know, there's lots of older people out there living with more complex issues, and that can cause challenge in scheme life. So I think in terms of the challenges, it kind of really makes you think about what is the role of sheltered housing longer term, and you know, what is the need for sheltered housing. But I think the starting point is to really look at the data. And I think in Wales, what the data shows us is that actually probably more than the rest of the UK within Wales, we have got an ageing population. When you look at the figures for 2040 in terms of the numbers of people who are projected to be over the age of 65, that's quite a big leap from 21% as a Welsh national average to 25.9%. And where ClwydAlyn operate in the north of Wales, that jump is even higher. That's up to 29%. So, not far short of 1 in 3 people in North Wales by 2040 are going to be over the age of 65. So that the data kind of suggests that actually an investment in older persons accommodation is the right thing to do, because there is going to be the need. Thinking about data again, when you overlap some of the population changes, again, looking at where things are headed for 2040, it's not just that we're seeing an increase in the number of people over the age of 65. We're actually forecasted to see a decrease in the number of working age adults who are potentially going to be there available to help and support older adults later in life. So again, kind of overlapping this information over the population data really suggests that longer term within Wales, we're going to have, quite a big issue and quite a big challenge to meet the needs of the older population. We all know that as housing associations that operate in the social care sector, how difficult recruitment is now. But as I said, when you look at some of those, that reduction in the number of working age adults, it suggests that challenge is going to be even more difficult moving forward. So I think in terms of what the data is telling us, that there is a need for older persons accommodation. But I think what we need to think about is what is our offer. As I said, I think supported housing has kind of become the poorer relation to extra care. So we need to think about, supported housing finding its place again, but then what is the offer and how do we ensure that offer is kept affordable for older adults? So what I try to think about in talking about this is thinking about some of the social determinants of health. If you were to look at a heat map of Wales of people living with 2 or more long-term conditions, what you find is those hotspot areas tend to be the social housing neighbourhoods. So again, the data shows that, in some of the traditional heartlands of social housing, there is, again, potential for more problems. So we need to think about actually what can we do to protect residents from some of those challenges moving forward. So I think in terms of where we need to go with supported housing, it's trying to create that demand again. And I think the example from Wrexham was excellent when you saw the transformation of the accommodation in terms of helping create that demand. But I think that we need to as well push and move towards the premise of healthier homes. It's not just about the asset, it's not just about the house, it's about what are the challenges that people are living with and what we can do as social housing providers to change things for the better for the residents. So one area where we can potentially look at is, technology enhanced living spaces. A couple of things that we in ClwydAlyn are doing. We're looking at some of the technologies that are out there that can actually keep properties for older people warm, but making sure that it's very cost effective. People will be familiar with solar panels, but we've in one of our shelter schemes, we've put in thermal wallpaper, which provides a really cost-effective way of keeping a room warm, because it's not there isn't the same cost as heating the whole house. It heats the room that the individual is in, so it's very cost-effective way of keeping people warm. But it's also thinking about partnerships and how technology can support. One thing we've done with the local health board in North Wales is created dialysis pathway for residents living in social housing, because again, what was acknowledged was that if you're in social housing, potentially you're not going to be as affluent as homeowners. So actually, you're less likely to drive, you know, because we're quite geographically dispersed within North Wales. You could be living, you know, over 20 miles away from your nearest hospital. So it was thinking about using technology and how we could create a home dialysis pathway for residents in social housing. So that's actually been implemented now in the west area of Betsy, and we've worked as a collaborative of housing associations with the local health board to put that pathway in for residents of social housing to be able to have dialysis at home. The cost of that, the cost differential of having dialysis at home versus in hospital, it's about 10% of the cost. You know, to have that dialysis in the hospital over the course of a year is in excess of £30,000. To have that at home, it's about 3,000. So again, it's using technology, not just to make it better for the resident, it actually reduces the cost across the whole system. So outside of technology, we've tried to think about how we can cater for residents without expensive service charges, because again, affordability is a huge issue. One of the things that we've developed within ClwydAlyn is a food enterprise, because again, food poverty is a huge issue for people. So what we wanted to do was have a vehicle to actually support residents to eat more healthy, nutritious meals. And so we established in partnership with Flintshire County Council a food enterprise that you know has delivered over 500,000 meals now. That service, you know, it's all freshly prepared, it's all healthy, it's all nutritious, because actually if older people are eating well, they're more likely to be able to remain in the home for longer, they're going to be fit, they're going to be healthy. So again, it's how we can address some of those social determinants of health through the work that we do. A big thing again, which, you know, colleagues have kind of touched on, it's around that sense of belonging. When we went out and spoke to not just our older residents, but all residents, the thing that has really been kind of lacking, especially since COVID, is almost that sense of belonging. So again, what we're aiming to do is work in partnership with other local organisations around how we can create those social networks to ensure that people, you know, have something to do. That it's not just around having those connections and those social connections, but it's about being part of something and having that sense of belonging. So we're working with the 2025 movement within North Wales to see how we can address issues of belonging. And again, that all resonates with what we want to do with our supported stock moving forward. And again, looking at mixed age communities, where we've spoken about probably a diminishing demand for sheltered housing, it's kind of rethinking some of it. You know, as I mentioned, 55 isn't very old now, and actually, do we actually need to look at the makeup of some of the our services and how we think of them? Because, you know, there are real benefits to having some mixed aged communities. The next point I was going to mention was just in terms of future proofing. Any new builds which we're looking at now, which is kind of designated for older persons accommodation, it's about thinking about actually what will residents need. You know, I've seen in some areas where blocks of apartments have come up, but there's no, even on new builds, there's no areas for scooter storage and mobility scooters. So these are the sorts of things that we're designing into schemes moving forward, but then also looking at universal design and flexible layouts of the properties. So again, you know, the last thing we want as people age is that, you know, they're having to go into residential care or other settings earlier than they actually need to. So actually building in some of that universal design and flexible layouts to enable us to adapt properties around the individual means that they should be able to stay in those properties and live in those properties, not just longer, but live well in those properties. And the final point I was going to make is around lobbying. I think we all, as a sector, have a huge part to play in lobbying Welsh Government. You know, I think the data, as I showed earlier on, shows that this is a huge issue, the ageing population within Wales. And we need to be the voice for those older people, and we need to look at you know, working together with health boards, but, you know, importantly, working together with Welsh Government to be the voice for older people, talk about the need, talk about the demand, and hopefully look to, you know, unlock funding that's going to pay for the conversion of these existing ageing schemes, but also to develop new purpose-built accommodation for older people. So I'll hand back to you, Joe. Thanks for that opportunity.
That's great. Thanks very much, Ed. I think some of the challenges you touched upon will be familiar to many of us who are here this afternoon. A couple of interesting points, or points that really interested me, was around that creating demand and that loss of identity almost of sheltered housing, and the erosion of services and the impact of that. I'm also really interested on your whole system change approach. And you kind of use that term, whole system change, and that, you know, looking for linkages with health services and other collaborations to really make the most of that sheltered housing asset. So thank you very much. I'm sure, again, we're open to questions, so please use the Q&A box. We are a little bit behind on time, so we're just going to flip things around now. And go on to the HousingLIN sheltered housing animation. And if people want to take a comfort break, I think the animation's 4 minutes long. If people want to go and take a quick comfort break, I'm assuming, Jeremy, that after the meeting today, we will be able to see the animation if we decide to go for a comfort break instead. Okay, so see you shortly.
This HousingLIN animation illustrates some of the key components from the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Housing and Care for Older People Inquiry Report on regenerating outdated sheltered housing. The HousingLIN was proud to be the secretariat to the APPG Inquiry and to author the report. Chaired by Lord Best and funded by Abbeyfield, the Inquiry Report is hosted on the HousingLIN website. The link to it is at the end of this animation. Thanks for watching.
Look at the new building, Jane. Nana says it's got all the mod cons.
Yeah, she was telling me about the new kitchen and sparkling bathroom, and there's a pull cord for emergencies.
Nana's so happy she doesn't have to go to a care home, and she loves the annual trip to Torquay.
Nana really loves living there. She's made lifelong friends and always has visitors.
Yeah, and she said the resident warden makes life so easy with all the social activities, from bingo to tea parties.
And it's amazing how a fresh lick of paint can brighten up the place.
I miss Nana, but I'm glad she lived in such a great place.
Yeah, I'm starting to think about Mum and Dad's future. It might be best for them to move into a place like that.
I think it would give them peace of mind. They wouldn't have to worry about the house and garden upkeep either.
Look, they've really made the place welcoming with the new entrance, windows and cladding, and the doors are now wheelchair accessible too.
You know, as I get older, staying local, close to friends, shops and transport will matter to me.
Same here, plus the sheltered housing is perfect with a bit of help available if needed.
Do you remember when our parents moved in? They loved it there. The resident warden and pendants really made a difference.
And they've added nice touches since, like a greenhouse and garden features, and another new lick of paint.
Did you know that the warden is now called a scheme manager? They've also got a new telecare system and cable TV.
I'm glad they replaced the baths with showers. Makes it so much easier for Mum and Dad.
Oh, they've updated the entrance. It looks really welcoming.
They've even got new outdoor lights now and mobility storage should they need it.
It's good they have the day centre and access to outdoor space.
Yes, Mum and Dad need a lot more care these days, but Dad's still growing his tomatoes on the balcony.
And the improvements like sliding doors to patios, balconies make life easier for them. And the solar panels have already helped to keep bills down.
Have you ever thought about moving into sheltered housing?
Not really, but I hear they now call it something like retirement living and there isn't a resident manager.
Well, with all those gizmos like video door entry, CCTV and smoke and fire alarms, I'd definitely consider retiring there. I'd feel safe and secure.
Can you imagine living in an intergenerational mixed community?
That would be amazing. Just imagine, young and old helping each other out.
They could help me learn about the latest technology, like on that BBC programme we used to watch with Mum and Dad years ago called Tomorrow's World.
Yes, before you know it, you'll be getting around on electronic scooters or going on virtual reality tours to all those places you've always wanted to visit.
Who'd have thought that sheltered housing could open so many doors in our retirement?
This animation and the APPG Inquiry Report are at www.housinglin.org.uk/re-HAPPI. If you found this of interest and want to find out more about the APPG report or how we can help you apply the learning from this inquiry report, visit our website or email us at consultancy@housinglin.org.uk.
That's great, Jeremy.
It's been premiered now. You're the first people to see it.
Well, we're very honoured.
I hope you liked it, Richard. You're on mute.
Clever wheeze to have the growing kids appreciating it and moving in the end. Yeah.
Well, all credit to Sally for helping to craft the text for that. Thank you, Sally, and the team behind the scenes.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, it's really good. And again, it kind of links to Ed's presentation around that erosion of identity and relaunching actually what is this? What could this mean? You know, and moving away from some of those mindsets that look back to more traditional models.
Right.
Are we okay to crack on, Jeremy? Right. So hope people have had a chance for a quick break. Let's move on to the second part, where Gary Hortop will be talking about, I guess, the challenge of revenue funding. Thank you, Gary.
Right, thanks, Jo. I'm going to ask Jerome to share my slides if you can, because I'm having a few technical issues and I've had to actually swap computers, so apologies. I'll try and bumble my way through this as best I can. If you can go on to the third slide, please, Jerome, that would be good. So I guess what I wanted to do was do a bit of a deep dive into some of the revenue aspects of extra care, because I guess most people who are on this call will probably be aware that Linc have merged with Pobble Housing Group, and we are in that process of exploring kind of assimilation and integration of some of our services. And our extra care offer in particular is one of those areas that we really kind of need to closely look at. So by way of a reminder, really, I mean, no doubt lots of housing organisations on this call who have extra care have a variation of a model, and it was quite interesting today, having been on a conversation with a Welsh local authority today around actually we still need to do some work around kind of redefining and defining exactly what our offer is, because it varies from local authority area to different landlords, and actually it creates a certain component of confusion. So you have to be very clear, I think, about what it is that we offer individuals. And so from our perspective, as a group perspective, we offer a range of services and activities across our respective organisations, those that are listed on the slide. And I don't doubt for a moment that everyone does one variation or another on this. I think the other thing we've been keen to promote is, so certainly a more recent development is around working in partnership with local authority colleagues around doing things like day centres, a bit of respite provision, in-reach and outreach in terms of the community, really thinking a bit harder about how we deliver activities and how do we begin to bring in other services into our extra care schemes and really think about how we use them as a wellbeing hub. So actually, you know, that access to health, adult social care, other voluntary services and advice services actually becomes quite important. So just to put this into context for us as a new group and a coming together of two organisations. If I can have the next slide, please. At the moment, we, Linc, currently manage 11 extra care schemes across South Wales. We have 2 in development in RCT and 1 at the kind of early stages of negotiation around planning with Merthyr. And as a consequence of the merger with the Pobble Group that took place back in April this year, we have 4 further services in South Wales that we begin to need to look at and consider kind of, well, how do we bring these services together? So in terms then of what our models look like and thinking about some of the challenges that this might present, if we can have a look at the next slide. This is a fairly recent conversation for us. It's the kind of discussion that has probably only happened over the last couple of months. And our models are quite different. So if you look at the fundamental aspects of what it is that we deliver, whilst there are some broad similarities, there are actually some quite significant differences as well. So for example, in Linc, we are generally speaking not the care provider, but we have a dedicated service manager on site who's funded by the service charge, who provides the intensive housing management service. We provide meals as a condition of tenancy. The staff that provide those meals are Linc employees, as are the domestic team. And in terms of recovering those costs, our model uses the variable service charge model, which is Landlord and Tenant Act compliant. Within Pobble, interestingly, their approach has been to try and be the care provider within their own schemes. And the care manager, in fact, kind of has a bit more of a general oversight of some of the housing management services and works more closely and in partnership with their general housing teams. The meals are not a condition of tenancy. Broadly speaking, it's a kind of pay-as-you-go type model. And that meal provision is outsourced to a contractor, and certainly in one instance, that is a kind of fixed number of meals a day, whether that gets taken up or not. Domestic services are also outsourced, and they use a fixed service charge model. So the challenge for us at the moment is to begin to think about how do we bring these together? How does this fit with our broader later living strategy that we're working on at the moment? And what does this really begin to look like? So kind of focusing on the operational aspects first of all. So one of the things that we're keen to try and do as part of this revised offer as a new group is to really begin to think about how we try and ensure that offer has some consistency, but actually recognise that the customer should influence perhaps what that final model might look like. I think particularly as you transition from one model to another. However, I think in terms of trying to present that and in terms of exploring that with tenants, certainly an area we're looking at is to try and reflect back to those tenants groups what those options might look like and actually what the cost implications of those options might be. And the rationale for that is nothing more complicated than one of the things that we have seen over certainly the last few years is the housing benefit teams actually undertaking a greater scrutiny of what goes into our service charge costs. And I think, you know, potentially there is a risk where if the service offer is radically different, then you present a greater opportunity for those costs to be kind of scrutinised and broken down and challenged by housing benefit teams. And I think it's really important that we make sure that we're doing that. I think as well, we need to try and ensure that we've got the capability really to be able to recover those costs. So there is a debate ongoing at the moment within our organisation around the fixed versus variable service charge argument. And I think where that really came to bear for us, and probably again a number of organisations on this call, was the energy crisis back in 2022, where we saw a significant increase in gas and electricity costs. And for us within Linc, that actually coincided quite badly, I suppose, with our procurement cycle. And we saw some very significant increases in gas and electricity costs that we then had to look to try and recover via the service charge. I suppose the good news is that actually in this coming year, they're predominantly reducing costs, but they're still not back to the low levels that they were pre-2022. And I think the other aspect for us in bringing the organisation together and thinking about our service models is the whole issue around affordability for tenants. In one sense, there's a degree of inevitability that over time costs increase, but what is it that we can or are able to do to be able to mitigate some of those costs? And by the bringing together of different models, we're now starting to explore, well, how can we begin to make some of the savings? How do we begin as a bigger organisation to look at actually a potential different model of service delivery that means a lower cost to our tenants for the management structure that we're providing? And again, thinking about some of the practical stuff around meals. So we have always, Linc have always taken the view that the meal provision should be a condition of tenancy. We manage that and deliver that in-house. And I think, again, part of the rationale around that is that we know for some of our customers, for some of our tenants, that meal they receive as part of that tenancy agreement might otherwise actually be the only hot meal they receive that day. It does allow us to manage the quality of that meal provision, but it comes with other challenges, certainly at the moment, around things like recruitment, because we're competing against the hospitality trade, and actually that is a very, very competitive and aggressive market to be working in at the moment. And ultimately, you know, I suppose as I touched on earlier, really, there is this need to make sure that we manage properly this planned transition and restructure of our services, and engage with the team around what that really begins to look like and how we work with our other colleagues within the organisation. And all of that kind of has to be done within the broader context of the funding challenges that we know are taking place within local authority budgets. It's austerity, I guess, by any other name, that we know is going to kind of happen over the next year or two. We've seen at best a stagnation of housing support grant. We've seen an increase in housing benefit scrutiny of the charges that we provide, and in some areas we have seen the withdrawal of the housing related support component of the package around extra care, and it's that money is being directed to, I guess, more acute and more statutory services. And I think what we're seeing now is also, if you like, a greater commissioner challenge in terms of them understanding and us having to be clear about what the extra is in extra care, what are the benefits that it can deliver, the so what question around, so what difference is our service and the services that we provide really beginning to make? And I think we're seeing a bit of a change in mindset. While that challenge exists, I was quite pleased, having come out of a meeting earlier on today, where we're working, and we're at the beginning of that work with the local authority who recognise all the challenges, but are beginning to explore ways in which we can work more collaboratively with the relatively limited budgets that we have, to try and do more with those budgets in a more collaborative and joined up way. So I think that gives you a sense of where we are as an organisation that's recently come together. We do have to kind of have sight of what we're doing around that extra care provision and the challenges that presents. And I think as well, the work that we're doing around developing a later living strategy, and it's some of the things that interestingly Ed touched on as well, around really beginning to think about what our offer is for those other older people that live across our sheltered housing and our general needs housing. And, you know, what is it that we can do for them in terms of understanding their needs and meeting those needs, but also beginning to think, and someone else touched on this earlier, about how do we begin to maximize the use of what we've got? Do we think about things like incentivizing moves to be able to maximize occupancy in extra care and sheltered housing and free up accommodation for in family housing for other people? So just a bit of an overview really of where we're at today. Thank you for that.
Thanks very much, Gary, and kind of highlighting those difficulties in responding to the preventative agenda, you know, against increasing costs, reducing income, and that constant theme of affordability. So clearly some challenges and difficult decisions ahead. But thank you very much for sharing that with us. And now we are going to hear from Mark Lewis on remodelling the sheltered housing asset, addressing the challenges. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Joanne. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Lewis. I'm Executive Director for Customer at ATEB down here in West Wales in Pembrokeshire. I'm a bit concerned because I've got a fear I'm going to probably pose far more questions than give answers and solutions to people. But I think it's important to try and, in looking at the APPG report, trying to look at that in the context of Wales. I don't have any lovely pictures and cartoons to show you. The presentation is more for my benefit and to stop me getting on a soapbox and being here till midnight tonight whilst still probably talking to myself whilst you've all gone home. And Jerome is going to very kindly move the slides around for me because I can't do more than one thing at once. I wanted first of all to start and paint a picture of ATEB, you know, where we're at. I mean, about 10% of our stock actually is scheme-based housing for older people, with 88 extra care units across 2 sites, and then another 240 units of sheltered or semi-sheltered accommodation, which we today call independent living. And I'll come on to that point in a moment. We also have a significant number of homes designated for older people, including self-contained bungalows and apartment blocks, and all based in one local authority area here in Pembrokeshire. Whilst our extra care housing is relatively modern, built in the last 10 to 15 years, and are lovely and thriving environments, our sheltered housing and semi-sheltered housing, most of which was built in the 1970s and 80s, at least one site is really beyond its life and not fit for purpose, and is not going to be possible to refurbish due to the topography of the site and the current layout. It has bed sits, etc. But demand remains high for all of those settings, and in some instances is increasing due to a housing crisis that we have down here in West Wales at the moment. So there's no particular difficulty in letting at the moment. However, you know, I think the picture that we've got here in West Wales will be consistent with many other social landlords in Wales, and consistent as well for most local authority areas. What I would say and just touch on here is, you know, I think that different terms have been used this afternoon to describe sheltered, and I know that the APPG report talks about redefining what we mean by sheltered housing, and having consistent branding has also been touched on this afternoon. And I do think that's a really important thing that we need to think about here in Wales and for our colleagues over the border in England. Our prospective customers, our current customers, don't recognise those boundaries. You know, it can be very confusing for them in terms of understanding what the different models mean. If we could just skip to the next slide. So when I was given the topic to talk about, I thought, well, trying to address the challenges, first of all, you need to understand them. And I think there's some really good and relevant points in the APPG report that really does set a really good foundation for pointing us in the right direction of what those challenges are. But it's also important, I think we need to try and look at those contexts, those issues in the Welsh context, and by that at a national, regional and local level, as well as at organisational levels, and some of the great practice we've seen going on across Wales this afternoon already, in terms of how those issues are being addressed at a local level. But from my experience, a lot of it's very local, and in terms of seeking that leadership and responsibility and ownership at a national and regional level in Wales is I feel still a little bit of a challenge. And whilst those themes and challenges highlighted in the report are going to be pretty much the same for Wales, there are a number of things that I think we need to start to think about. And in particular for me, it's about understanding the housing need at local, but also community level here in Wales. Not just today, but in the future. And I think it's really important to remember that it's people in their late 30s, 40s and 50s today. They're going to be benefiting from all the great work we're doing in refurbishing sheltered housing in Wales at the moment, and any further work that we do. Time flies very quickly. I've worked in older persons housing for a very long time, and it only seems like yesterday when I was working with people who've been born in the 1890s and early 1900s, and how quickly time has moved on to think that actually it's going to be people born in the 60s and 70s are going to be the people using sheltered and other models of housing in the very near future. And the most important thing for me is then hearing the customer voice. What are their aspirations for the future? What are their aspirations for current and future housing options that they might have? And trying to make sure that what we do today will meet those aspirations of the future. I think Wales has some particular unique issues that are a little bit different to England, in that, you know, we're predominantly rural. So we do have to think about, you know, and give due consideration to what this all means for rural areas, as well as what it means for smaller communities, such as the LGBT community. And there's some great references to this in the APPG report, in terms of understanding the aspirations of many different groups and many different communities, to ensure that our sheltered housing options, our housing options, are fit for the future. Not least the issue of dementia, in terms of, must also be a really serious consideration when thinking about best practice designs. And if I was to be really controversial here, you know, is it sheltered accommodation that people are going to want? And I think that's an important thing that we need to ask ourselves, and particularly ask those people who are currently in their late 30s, 40s and 50s. Is that the model that they're going to want? Is that what they're going to need? And whilst acknowledging it brings many advantages that we've seen today, my feeling is there's probably quite a mix of options that we need to have on the table for future older generations, and that we need to be really clear and have a defined housing pathway for older people to address all the issues that the APPG report touches on, in terms of how it can create, release larger homes for families, whilst it can, of course, you know, promote greater independence for individuals, and not least, you know, save money for health, social services and other statutory sectors. Just skip on to the next slide, please, Jerome. And, you know, I was really interested in reading the APPG report in terms of an agreed set of common standards, in terms of what we all are trying to achieve here, that all social landlords could use in assessing existing stock, and you know, not wanting to promote, well, why not promote the great work of HousingLIN? But of course, the HAPPI standards are a great model for that. But we don't currently have an agreed set of standards here in Wales, and we're a small country. It shouldn't be too difficult for us to have an agreed set of common standards that we can all assess our existing stock against. And whilst Welsh Government have quite recently launched WHQS 23 that addresses a lot of the issues around energy efficiency, etc., really here we need a WHQS 23 plus for older persons housing. It doesn't, for me, go far enough in terms of addressing some of those issues that where older persons housing is concerned, and in particular in settings such as sheltered housing and extra care. And all of that can be reinforced by good practice tools that can promote best practice for housing for older people. I think one of the things that we need to be very, very careful on is that there has to be meaningful collaboration at local level. One of the things that particularly concerns me is landlords who work in the same area, and there's 3 of us here in Pembrokeshire who all have sheltered housing stock, all in a similar position to ATEB, some of it ageing, and definitely in need of refurbishment, that we're working together, that there needs to be a shared vision and a shared strategy at local level. There is a real risk here that we could find ourselves refurbishing 3 or 4 sheltered housing sites at the same time in the same area, and the pressures that would put on decanting individuals, etc. The potential for people to be disposing of too many sites, building too many new homes. And that collaboration and that shared vision is going to be so essential in making sure that we get it right. And we'll also address some of those issues around future aspirations and particular needs of certain communities, such as rural communities and people from other backgrounds. Just skip on to the next slide. Thank you, Jerome. But obviously the biggest issue is money. And at the end of the day, whilst there are numerous existing Welsh funding streams out there, and I've listed a few of them there, it's not enough. And I think there's a real risk that it gets lost with all the different funding streams having different purposes and different aims and objectives and different criteria, rather than looking at the whole. And I would really want to be lobbying Welsh Government to say, look, we need to put some specific funding aside for this that addresses the scheme as a whole, and not just how it meets its WHQS standards, how it's going to be decarbonised or more energy efficient in the future. And there's a real need to try and make sure that there's more emphasis put on the whole, rather than this. What could the risk is you could end up with a bit of an ad hoc approach. You don't want to be putting solar panels on a building where if that building isn't going to be in existence in 20 years' time when you come to assess it against a set of standards for sheltered housing. So I do think that we need that leadership really at national level to take some greater ownership of maybe how we take things forward in the future. I would agree that there needs to be really specifically funded and targeted funding towards sheltered housing refurbishment, and as well as building new homes for older people, and picking up on the issue of population growth, and in particular the growth of the older generation in Wales. And I think the figures for Pembrokeshire are even more startling than the figures presented earlier for North Wales in terms of the growth of older people population compared to the rest of the population. We really need to think long and hard about a range of options, including sheltered, including extra care, and how we make sure that they are fit for the future. Just jump onto the next slide. And it's not, I think most importantly for me in addressing the challenges is that it's not just about the money. It does require leadership at local, regional and national level. And that's essential to really drive forward an agenda of change. And at a time when we're all so busy doing so many other things with so many other pressures on the sector at the moment, it does need a commitment to drive forward improvements around older persons housing. It requires that time and resource when there is already so much to do. And I think that's probably the greatest challenge of all. There's been so much change in the sector in Wales. There's so many new things coming at us all of the time. And where do we find the time and the space and the resource required to take forward improving our old social housing stock for older people? And I think there's therefore a risk that does cause a risk of, you're not given the required time to assess your current stock. You're not working in collaboration the way that you should be, because the time and resource isn't there. And that's a real challenge, I think, for the sector at the moment, when there's so many other things that we're faced with. But I do strongly believe that doing nothing isn't an option. You know, the money that's already, a lot of this has already been mentioned today, that the money that is saved from the social care and health budgets in terms of providing good quality housing for older people, you know, is very obvious, very well evidenced. You know, we're going to see an increasingly difficulty and challenge in terms of letting hard to let properties if the standards aren't up to what people's aspirations are, and we know those aspirations are going to change. And it does free up homes for people who are living in larger in larger properties who don't need to anymore, as well as promoting the well-being of people living in our communities who are aging. So I think the challenges are significant. I think there's been some great examples today of how they can be overcome, but I think we've got to make sure as well we learn from mistakes we made as we go along the journey, and make sure that we are really lobbying Welsh Government, in my view, to take some greater ownership and play a leading role in taking forward some of the initiatives, some of the ideas, and addressing some of the challenges that have been presented in the APPG report. So as I said, not that many answers, probably far more questions. But then if I had all the answers, I'd be bottling it and selling it and not telling you at a HousingLIN Symposium. But thank you.
Thanks very much, Mark, and a very clear call for better collaboration to improve outcomes for local communities, and a very clear call for greater leadership at local, regional and national levels. So thank you very much. A warm welcome now to Michelle Long, who, a bit of a curveball here, is going to talk about the Eliminate agenda and the potential for intergenerational action. Over to you, Michelle.
Thanks very much, Joanne. I do have some slides to share this afternoon, so if you just bear with me and I will share my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. Brilliant, thank you.
Sorry, Michelle. Yeah, that's perfect now. Great.
Okay, thanks, Jerome. Okay, so in terms of the Eliminate agenda, just by way of introduction, this has formed part of the Welsh Government's programme for government and takes the view that some private companies can make significant profits from accommodation, care and support services that are provided for looked after children. And there is a commitment within that programme for government to eliminate private profit from the care of looked after children by 2027. So my presentation this afternoon will focus on some work that we've been involved at Melin to help our local authority partners to begin making steps towards achieving this aim. So in the former Gwent area, a regional partnership has been established to seek to develop solutions to the Eliminate agenda. And to that end, a team has been established and is now hosted by Newport City Council. And we at Melin were approached by Torfaen County Borough Council to see what we could do to help to develop services differently for looked after children. We already have a well-established partnership with Torfaen, having developed a wide range of specialist housing over the years, which includes extra care schemes and also supported housing for adults with learning disabilities and physical disabilities also. So Torfaen set out quite clearly in their delivery plan for 2024-25 that they were seeking to review and develop a broad range of accommodation for looked after children, particularly specialist provision, in order to ensure consistency of placement and reduce profit in care by 2027. So our challenge was, what could we do to assist? So we identified a property in Cwmbran called Green Hill Bungalow, which was a a 3-bedroom bungalow with a double garage, which you can see to the side there, a lovely long rear garden, and really importantly, close to Cwmbran town centre and local amenities. And for us, it presented real potential for refurbishment to provide a children's home. And in terms of linking with today's session, it's also in very close proximity to our existing extra care scheme at Tŷ Cainant. So it ticked a lot of boxes for us. So with support from the local authority, we agreed to move forward and purchase the bungalow. We secured planning consent, which included converting the garage into an annex. We secured funding via the Housing with Care Fund, which would help us to purchase and refurbish the bungalow, along with obviously the use of Melin's private finance as well. And just for those who aren't aware, HCF is available to regional partnership boards to provide supported and specialist housing for people with care and support needs, but this also includes residential children's homes. So this seemed like the right funding route for us to progress this project. So I've included a photograph there of the completed project. So the refurbishment was completed in September this year by our contractor, One Transformation Limited. So what we've provided is, in the main bungalow there's 2 bedrooms with a shared kitchen, living room, kitchen and bathroom, plus a staff space and sleep-in facility. Staff are on site 24/7 at the bungalow. And then alongside that is a self-contained 1-bedroom annex for a young person to reside, who can also use the support and care provided by the staff based at the bungalow itself. In terms of how we have linked up with Torfaen in providing the bungalow, we've entered into, rather than any form of lease, we've entered into a long-term partnership agreement with the local authority's children's services. This agreement means that there is a commitment to use this bungalow and the annex as a children's home for at least the next 10 years. And the local authority have commissioned an organisation called Midway Transitional Solutions to provide the on-site care and support. And they have committed as an organisation to work towards becoming a not-for-profit organisation to link in with the Eliminate agenda. We charge a very affordable weekly rent to the local authority for the whole property. And the specification in the bungalow itself has been designed to meet more complex needs. I've got some photographs to share a little later that explains a bit more about that. And we also, to help our local authority partners, were able to secure grant funding to furnish the bungalow and annex as well. So these are just some photographs from within the bungalow. It has been designed to meet more complex needs. So you will see that some of the units in the kitchen do have locks on them. And we also have the wall boarding that you can see around the living room there that just will help give some protection there in that space. But it's been refurbished to a very modern standard, but also to try to give as homely a feel as possible. It's really important. One of the aims of the local authority is that this should feel like a family home. We were also asked to look at incorporating anti-ligature design specifications within the bungalow itself to minimise risks for anyone with a particularly complex need in that area. So I've just included some photographs there that show some of the design features that could be transferred to other types of accommodation. We've heard lots about refurbishments this afternoon, so these are ideas areas that could be used in other types of accommodation too. So for example, we've incorporated window blinds within the glazing of the windows there. And also you'll see, particularly in the bathroom there, specific type of shower and wash hand basin that has that anti-ligature specification. So last week, in a great time for this presentation today, was the official opening of Greenhill Bungalow. And you can see there our Chief Executive, Paula, cutting the ribbon with the Councillor Richard Clark as well from Torfaen. And I've included Councillor Clark's quote there from the opening ceremony for the bungalow, highlighting the steps that the provision of this bungalow makes towards meeting the Welsh Government's not-for-profit agenda, and also by developing high quality residential facilities for looked after children closer to home, so that we're not relying on out of county placements in future, so that those young people can keep their connections with their families and friends. So in terms of scope for intergenerational activity, I mentioned earlier that the location of this children's home is very close to our well-established extra care scheme at Tŷ Cainant. And at Tŷ Cainant, we already have really close links with many young people's groups in the area. Just two that I'll mention is we host young people from a local school for those with learning disabilities. They enjoy visiting Tŷ Cainant to sell cakes that have been baked at the school and get involved in coffee mornings and sales at the scheme. And we also have volunteers come into the scheme too. And we recognise that there is real potential to develop those links further to incorporate Greenhill Bungalow, because I think what we would hope to see is that through intergenerational activities, the links between young and old can help increase confidence both ways and challenge perceptions as well. We're always looking out for activities to reduce social isolation and loneliness, and that works both ways. It's not just older people that can feel socially isolated, and I think since the pandemic that's particularly true for younger people too. So we hope that this will be a two-way process as well. Just finally to say that we are hoping to continue our work with Torfaen Council to continue to create further opportunities for children and young people to thrive, and hopefully to continue to develop those intergenerational links as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle. I appreciate that one was a little bit of a curveball, but actually fitted in quite nicely with the things that we've been talking about today. So Jeremy has put some messages in the chat. We're not going to be going on to Q&A. I am just going to hand straight over to our second keynote speaker of the session, and that is Victoria Lloyd. And Victoria, you will take us up to the close of the session at 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And I'm just going to find my slides to share. Bear with me. I've lost them a second. I wanted to start by thanking for the opportunity to join this afternoon. It's been an absolutely fascinating couple of hours. Right. Can you see my slides there? Are they up?
They are coming up. They're not up just yet.
I think they might be on
there it is. There they are.
Brilliant.
Perfect.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been absolutely fascinating and a real pleasure to be speaking alongside a group of people that have clearly got such passion for older people's well-being, older people's housing. It's been really, really interesting, really fantastic to hear about some of the developments that are taking place and some of what's planned for the future. So my name's Vicky Lloyd. I'm the Chief Executive of APPG Cymru. We're the national charity for older people in Wales. We work very closely with the Age UK network and local partners here in Wales. And we provide a range of advice and support for older people. So I've got my slides, they're not moving. Bear with me, there we are. So yeah, we provide a range of advice, services and support for older people to improve their quality of life and really to make sure that they can live fulfilling, safe and healthy lives as they age. As a national charity, our focus is really on advice, advocacy and campaigning. And whilst we're trying to improve lives for older people, one of the things that I want to do in the presentation this afternoon is talk a little bit about some of the challenges that older people are facing, what their experience is like at the moment, and the fundamental role that housing can provide in mitigating some of that. And I think some of the presentations today have been really good examples of what that looks like. So some of the challenges for older people over recent years, issues such as COVID, cost of living, disproportionately impacted older people, affecting their financial security, their health and their well-being. Housing is a key determinant of health, as we've already heard, and it's fundamentally linked with the ability of older people to live healthy, active and independent lives. The right housing in the right place with the right level of support can make the real difference in terms of having well-being or not. And we're living at a time, several of the speakers have already talked to us about the longevity of older people, which is very much to be celebrated, but good health doesn't always accompany that ageing, and it makes it even more essential that people have safe, accessible and well-maintained homes. The design, the location, the condition of a home can significantly influence the way somebody can maintain their independence, the way they can manage their health conditions and stay connected to their communities. And poor housing can equally have detrimental impacts on the health of older people. Damp, inaccessible conditions, for example, can cause respiratory problems. It can increase the risk of falling. It can contribute to social isolation. And without the right environment, people might struggle to maintain the quality of life that they deserve. And that's why that point about safeguarding a range of housing options for older people is so important. So I'm going to, as I say, focus some of my remarks on the experiences of older people at the moment and sort of link that point about housing and well-being. Some of these stats have already been touched on in terms of the presentations today. I think Ed already shared some of the demographic data, but it's a start point for that picture about older people. Wales has got the highest percentage of people aged 65 across all regions of England and Wales, apart from the southwest of England. And in terms of places like Powys and Conwy and Anglesey, even higher than the Wales average. Powys, it's up to 27.8% of older people of 65 plus. And whilst it's 21.3% for Wales as a whole, that's 3% higher than in England. That makes a significant difference in terms of the provision of housing and services for older people. Conwy has the highest proportions of people over the age of 90 in Wales at 1.5%, while it's 1% for Wales as a whole. I talked about health a little bit earlier. 13% of people in Wales over the age of 65 report bad or very bad health, and 31% say that they're limited a lot by long-standing illness, while 54% have some limitation from long-standing illness. And that really does paint a picture in terms of some of the support that older people need. And to further that, we conducted an annual survey of older people earlier this year, over March and April. We asked older people what matters to them and what they need to live happy and fulfilled lives. So we had around 1,300 responses from people aging from 50 to 99, all local authorities in Wales, and at a range of demographics between that, from people with different protected characteristics. And the report gives us a huge amount of interesting information and valuable insights into the daily realities of older people's lives. So one of the most pressing challenges identified was health. And 51% of respondents told us that physical health was their greatest challenge. And that's a massive increase on last year, 15% increase in terms of the people that were saying physical health was a challenge. And that really underscores for me the importance of having homes that are designed to support physical well-being. But then mental and emotional health emerged as a significant concern this year too. 29% of respondents reported challenges in that area. Again, 9% up on last year. The impact of isolation, loneliness and financial stress on mental health can't be overstated, and the condition and accessibility of your house can have a profound effect on these issues. And then related to health, other factors that interact with your home, the built environment, the community where you live, things like access to GPs, to treatment, to dentistry, of ageism people experience within health, the ability to actually get to appointments, depending on where you live and where all of those services are, really, you know, there's a link between can you get to them, can you access them. We heard about cost of living as another major issue for older people. 48% of people told us that finance was an issue. Rising rents, utility bills and food costs put financial pressure on older people. And many people told us that they're on the cusp of falling into severe financial difficulties. We know most older people will be on a fixed income, so they invariably struggle with unexpected costs. And people have told us how they are worrying about meeting rises in bills, and that any increase that they do receive in their pension is quickly swallowed up by increases in outgoings. The cost of maintaining a home, whether for repairs, for heating, or simply keeping up with those rising living expenses, can become a major worry. And it's things like the recent government decision on the winter fuel payments, and only paying that to people on pension credit, all impacts into that space, and really impacts on the way people can upkeep their home. Of those who were experiencing the challenge of their physical health, poor housing was raised as a significant concern, especially by renters. We had one person tell us about living in a damp house with mould on their walls and the impact of their health of the environmental factors. And it's a stark reminder of how housing quality is related to health incomes, and the condition of the fabric of the home can make conditions worse, and particularly challenging for older people that are dealing with multiple health challenges. 1 in 20 of our respondents talked to us about fear of falling. And they linked that to the built environment. And so the areas around their homes, lack of lowered pavings, lack of handrails, lack of lifts in buildings, increasing risk with a fall. Somebody told us that they know they should exercise more for their health, but they live in a village with no paths or no pavements. So thinking about where older people's housing is in relation to the other services I've mentioned before, but again, crops up time and again. Highlighting the importance of accessible communities and age-friendly infrastructure that supports the mobility of individuals. Isolation and loneliness has been mentioned today as well. 18% of people told us that isolation and loneliness is a challenge over the last year. It's an improvement on last year, and COVID is now being mentioned less frequently. But we heard from many people with disabilities or long-term health problems that are still unable to socialise regularly or get out of their homes without assistance, which is why seeing the redevelopment of the provision in Wrexham with those spaces for people to do their activities, to get together, to be on the edge of an activity if you don't want to get involved was really, really good to see. And the fact that it felt so fresh and inviting is really important as well, I think. 69% of those who said they struggled with loneliness over the last 12 months struggled with their physical health. Somebody told us about losing their independence, driving them mad. They've always been stubborn. The loss of independence also impacts on their mental health as well. And that inability to leave the house impacts on people's self-confidence, further leading to a challenge to overcome their own loneliness. We heard from people about their representation in society and discrimination, and that's why some of the presentations have been, again, really pleasing this afternoon, to listen to people talking about listening to older people, understanding their needs, hearing from them and centering those older people's voices, because 70% of the people that responded to our survey said that they felt that older people weren't well represented in society. They thought that views of older people were still bound up in ageist and patronising stereotypes, that the way people are depicted in the media as physically frail and incapable of thinking themselves doesn't represent them. And similarly, respondents from ethnic minority backgrounds told us that their voices, they felt, were unlikely to be heard, whether in the public sphere, in media, in politics. And other people told us around the way public spaces are becoming increasingly inaccessible for older people, disappearance of things like public toilets, benches, dropped pavements, and other pieces of essential infrastructure. And they felt that shows how poorly older people are represented in society, because those decisions are being made around public spaces that are against the interests of the older population. Again, good to hear about digital exclusion this afternoon, because of that challenge of over-reliance on online information and the lack of alternatives for people that are not online. Lots of older people still don't have access to the internet or a smartphone, so finding ways to engage with them that are not online, really, really important. So it's a whistle-stop tour, very conscious of the time, but just wanted to reflect that it's clear that the right housing, right location, right support can significantly improve the health and independence of older people. Warm, good quality homes with accessible infrastructure linked to the community can mitigate lots of the challenges I've described. So specialist housing for older people, including sheltered or housing for independent living, extra care housing can offer support for older people, helping them to live independently for longer. A safe, secure environment can reduce demand for formal care. Community living with the associated benefits to the quality of life is so important. But the examples we've heard this afternoon of providers being aware of and responding to those barriers, I think is what has just been really, really heartening for me. Those examples of what can be done to keep people warm, to keep them connected, to keep them eating well, we heard about, I think, all really link back to the work and the recommendations in that report about the regeneration of sheltered accommodation. The importance of getting it right is not just for older people and their individual well-being, but for our broader community, and that holistic preventative approach, I think, is absolutely vital. The report anticipates the needs I've talked about, and I think it talks about tailoring provision to the diverse range of older people, agreeing terminology with older people, hearing the voices which older people tell us is so important to them, and supporting that independence through co-produced use of technology. I think absolutely fantastic. So thank you for listening. Hope I haven't gone on too long, and thank you for everything everybody's doing, because I think it all really does contribute to an age-friendly society, and will set us well for the future.
Oh, thank you so much, Victoria. Really appreciate you joining us this afternoon and sharing those very real challenges that are experienced by many older people in Wales. And I think you touched on this when you summarised. I think it was very positive to see that some of the challenges that you highlighted have clearly been recognised by the speakers who were here today, talking about some of the interventions, the thinking, the ambition. And if we can kind of keep that up and keep that pace going and keep that drive and that passion, to see if we can start to make some inroads into the challenges and disadvantages faced by many older people. I think your final comment there about it's not just about older people here and now. There is that whole future generations element to the work that we are all involved in. So before I hand back to Jeremy, I just want to say a huge thank you to firstly everybody who's joined the session this afternoon, but a very big thank you to all of the people who have come along to speak and share their experiences. I just think it's been a really valuable couple of hours in, I always feel quite motivated and inspired when I come away from sessions like the one this afternoon. So thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you again soon, and I will hand over to Jeremy now. Thank you.
Well, Joanne, can I also personally thank you for co-chairing this afternoon's session, and with you and the HousingLIN steering group in Wales for helping to curate and pull together a really fantastic programme. And big thank you, as you say, to all our contributors, our keynote speakers, Lord Best and Victoria, and all the contributors from the steering group members and case studies that we've heard. The chat shows there's a lot of interest, and we as a steering group in Wales will continue to work and collaborate to take these agendas forward. Before I draw to a close, just to say, if you're interested in either becoming a member of the steering group or a sponsor of the HousingLIN to enable us to continue our programs, please do get in touch with us. We meet 2 or 3 times a year to sort of pull together a program of activities, and many of these build on the conversations we've already had today around technology, sheltered housing, extra care housing, etc. And Victoria, I love the point that you're making about age friendliness as well. We really need to make sure all our homes in Wales are in future age friendly, and perhaps that links back to those happy design principles and independent living standards that we've touched on this afternoon. But look, we've overrun slightly. We're going to have to cut the Q&A. I really apologise for that, but please do contact us if you have any particular questions that you want to ask any of our contributors. I'm sure they won't mind responding via the HousingLIN. If you're interested, if this is the first time you've joined one of our webinars, we normally run them every Tuesday afternoon. And indeed, next week on the 19th of November, our happy hour is on the partnerships across health and housing. And we'll be looking at a couple of English examples in particular around that. But all it leaves me to say is to thank you to all of you for participating, the team that put together that fantastic animation that I hope you enjoyed watching, and the team behind the scenes at the HousingLIN who've helped put on today's session, our symposium, and overcome any technical glitches that were sort of challenging and thrown at us. But I wish everybody a really happy afternoon.